Okay, today we're joined by Darryn McClelland, Asiamet's CEO, who last gave an update about 3.5 weeks ago on the feasibility study progress. And today he's going to update again and run through a short presentation, again updating on the feasibility study and a recent site visit to KSK. Darryn, over to you.
Okay, Sasha, good to join you again. Yeah, it's been 3.5 weeks. I think I joined you last time I was in Australia visiting the engineers working on our feasibility study. So it's good back here in Jakarta in our office. So good to have a chance to talk to you today.
Very good. So, okay, you've got a short agenda on the presentation. Maybe you might want to run through that just to quickly highlight the areas you're going to discuss.
Yeah, sure. Today, just want to touch on Asiamet's value proposition. Just good to remind myself and others, where the value sits in Asiamet and what we see looking forward. I'd like to give an update on some aspects of the feasibility study, an update on how some certain things are progressing there. I'd just like to share some feedback on a site visit which I conducted a couple of weeks ago. Got back from a couple of weeks ago. Site visit to KSK, Central Kalimantan. And also a bit of an update on some corporate activities and things that are happening at the moment with Asiamet going forward. So Asiamet's value proposition. Asiamet is focused on copper, and the themes which are very clear certainly to me, and I think others, are around decarbonisation and the thematic and understanding that, trying to simplify a topic like decarbonisation. You could say that decarbonisation is replacing fossil fuels and electricity generation using alternatives such as solar, wind, batteries. And secondly, replacing fossil fuels as a means of powering transportation, cars, trucks, planes, shipping. So all of the replacement of those fossil fuels generally coming through electrification. So the electrical conductivity of copper makes it such an integral part of every aspect of the energy transition. There's just no escaping an escalating need for copper. I've got a couple of slides shared with this presentation, which are courtesy of a recent Bloomberg NEF article, and it's one of many articles that are being presented and generated over the course of the last few months, which show such a clear picture of the future shape of the copper market and the challenges presented by the energy transition and the requirements of copper moving forward. And of course, Asiamet is well placed with two significant projects containing JORC-compliant copper resources and reserves for KSK. At KSK and BK, within that BKM, JORC-compliant resources of 450,000 tonnes and reserves at 206,000 tonnes of soluble copper, not total copper. We have a detailed feasibility study update, well advanced for BKM, which I'll talk a little bit more about today. And of course, as part of that feasibility study work that goes on around that, certainly some development planning, which is now in progress to understand how we take that project forward. And then we have Butong, a large copper porphyry, JORC-compliant resource, 2.4 million tonnes of copper on a 100% basis. Renewed interest from both domestic and foreign groups in Butong's resources, just starting to form up recently, which I will also talk about a little bit towards the end of the presentation. As I said, the next few slides coming from a recent article written by Bloomberg NEF. You can see here throughout from 2021 through to 2040, looking at demand, refined copper demand, running from sort of circa 25 million tonnes. Increasing up to close to 40 million tonnes, just shy of that, 38.9 million tonnes. 50% increase in the volume of refined copper demand over the course of less than 20 years. Just moving on to where copper is being used and some of the changes in, some of the significant changes happening in the consumption of copper. As you can see here, looking at a graph of a steady increase in the use of copper in construction, which is, I guess, the standard growth profile of copper over the course of maybe the last 30, 40 years. But then very quickly taking off from, as I say, from about now, from early 20s going through until 2040, seeing the requirement for copper in transportation increasing significantly and transitioning, in 2030 to being the one of the dominant consumers of copper, of refined copper, being transportation. So, of course, electrification of transportation is going to require an enormous amount of copper, given the volume of copper required in electric vehicles, irrespective of what type, is so much significantly higher than internal combustion engine vehicles. Another source of pressure on the copper market is a likely sustained deficit in copper that is available. There's forecasted supply deficits moving forward through the next 2 decades and beyond. The case that we're looking at here, as it clearly states, is excluding recycling supply, but it also is looking at a best case supply growth scenario in the way that this report and the work was done. So of course some of that deficit is going to be covered by recycling of copper, but certainly not expected to be the full deficit. So certainly some significant challenges in persistent deficits of refined copper moving forward over the next 20 to 30 years. And again, with increasing demand, increasing deficits, the challenge of mining and extracting copper is getting harder over time. This graph is pretty simple in its construct, but the implications are quite clear. The declining grades over time, the challenge to declining grades. I mean, it's basically harder to extract copper from the ground. We're having to move more material, having to do additional work to get the same volume of copper now as we did, twice as much as in 2030 as what we would in 2000. So certainly that is putting pressure with lowering grades and increasing demand. It's sort of putting that squeeze on the ability to deliver the copper that is so necessary for the decarbonisation of our of industry, of our civilization at this point in time. The dynamics, everything that comes together for copper now is certainly looking at the short term, maybe the short term impacts that we're seeing on the global economy now, and putting some pressure on copper pricing. Certainly there may be valid reasons for that, but simply looking 12, 24, 36 months out, as some of those more macroeconomic themes will probably tend to resolve themselves. The thematic of needing significantly larger volumes of copper as electrification of both our power systems and also power systems, as well as our transportation, is simply going to see a significant squeeze on copper. And more articles, more news is coming out to a similar effect, I think, Sasha.
Speaking of news on copper squeeze, there was a big article today from Bloomberg, which the headline was a pretty big one. A great copper squeeze is coming for the global economy. The recent downturn for copper prices only stands to worsen the coming deficit as the slump discourages new investments for the metal used in EVs and power grids. It then goes on to say, you wouldn't know it from looking at the market today, but some of the largest metals and miners traders are warning that just in a couple of years' time, a massive shortfall will emerge for the world's most critical metal, one that could itself hold back global growth, stoke inflation by raising manufacturing costs, and throw global climate goals off course. The recent downturn and the underinvestment that ensures only threatens to make it worse. So, with that in mind, Asiamet's got incredibly, probably, as you've said, you'd have to confirm, one of the most advanced copper projects of its kind in Asia. But from where we are now, how are we going to get there? And what's ahead? Is there value from investors at this level?
How we get there, Sasha? Our focus, our focus on delivering value for our shareholders is delivering on the promise of the feasibility study for BKM, which we'll talk about today as well. developing and update the feasibility study, as we identified, needed to be updated this year. It's over 3 years old since we last completed, and of course, there's been a significant shift in various aspects associated with the feasibility study that need to be updated, and also, as we had spoken about before, independent technical expert review. Whilst no red flags, giving us confidence to continue with the feasibility study, there were aspects that were identified by the ITE that were recommendations for us to be able to do those in the update, which would certainly lend the outcome of that being moved to bankable study status and enabling us to be able to start that engagement with the banks. So that's, for me, that's certainly a significant, that's in my view, that's been probably the primary focus, of my efforts, of course, over the last couple of months is continuing to steer the feasibility study through and guiding through some changes and things that we need to make, and making sure that we're still pushing as hard as we can to take that forward and be able to deliver that in Q4. So it's that's really our focus, and being able to show people that we have this project which is feasible, which is bankable, and that we're able to take through to funding and development. So that's a near-term realization, and one of the key things as well is that, as you've just stated in that article, with copper prices coming off somewhat, and people probably appreciating the incentive price needs to be well above where we are now, it's putting pressure on people not doing projects or reconsidering projects or delaying them. I think over the course of the next couple of years, if there is a bit of softness in the price and general economic conditions, that's a good time to build a project, because you're expecting some of the inputs, such as maybe energy prices, copper prices itself, those sort of things which go into building a project like this over the next couple of years. Those input prices will start to come off from where they were maybe 6 or 12 months ago, and that gives a better opportunity to control capital costs, which is really important for the BKM project, and so can get over the fear of maybe near-term pricing and look at what the future looks like from 2025 onwards. Now is the next couple of years is the best time to build a project, and I think it could be one of, you might even argue it could be one of the better times that we'll see for some period of time, where we would have some control of capital costs and input prices not getting too far, not sort of getting too far ahead and under control. So I think that's really important for us. But maybe just there's one final slide. There's one final slide here, Sasha, on again it's about the use of copper. Just talk quickly through this before we go on to the FS study update. I also wanted to share the link to the actual webinar that this information comes from. Again, going to the theme of the requirement of copper, and the study that's referenced here not only looked at copper, but a range of metals that are required for decarbonisation or electrification of power systems and also transport. The upshot of this is that in order to phase out fossil fuels from generating electricity and also in transportation, you would need a total of 4.6 billion tonnes of copper. And that is compared to the current known reserves of copper of 880 million tonnes. So our current reserves cover about 20% of the requirements for the complete, decarbonisation of electricity generation and transportation. So, and that's only for one, as they say, it's only for one generational change out of that technology. Of course, there are more generations. The equipment, the things that we put in place to decarbonise once, obviously will need to be replaced over time. So what you're looking at here is purely just the volume of metals required and the volume of metals we have that are required to do that change out just the one time. So in terms of being able to do that over a period of time, it's clear that more of those metals need to be found, and those with resources not only reserves but resources that still need some additional work are going to become increasingly valuable as this requirement dawns on people. I think it still probably hasn't fully sunk in the magnitude of the volume of metals that are needed to decarbonise our way of life, I guess, for want of a better term. So being in copper, you can see there's other metals there, of course, which are equally precious for the decarbonisation processes going forward. But copper is such an important material for everything that is required to happen going forward. So that's why we think Asiamet is in a good position. And in a relative value term for our shareholders, again, we would argue that we are severely undervalued given the resources that we have in our stable, in the Asiamet stable. But again, for us, it's pushing ahead as fast as we can to make sure people understand that value, and hopefully we can get that re-rated to be more reflective of its true position.
Okay, thanks, Darryn. So there's two things really which will unlock that value. The first is the completion of the updated feasibility study, and secondly, something to happen on the corporate side, which will enable the company to get there, to get into production on the back of the completed feasibility study as well. I guess if you can go into both of those now, then that would be great.
Yeah, so our the feasibility study, we'll talk through some detail of that and talk through some. It's okay. We'll talk through some of the corporate activities maybe towards the end, and just explain where some things are at with respect to that, and how we're going to take those forward. So, looking at our feasibility study update, certainly our principal engineering group, Newpro Engineering, they're working at pace on multiple work streams. Been a lot of focus since I was in the office through to now on completing activities related to the bulk earthworks, and that's probably the single biggest activity related to the development of the project, and we really needed to get that package done, and we have delivered that to Doyd's operating subsidiary, Boomer, and they've commenced work on investigating that and starting to look at building the model for cost estimation for that package of work as part of the study. I've met with the Boomer infrastructure team this week to go through the information with them in person and talk through some key aspects of sort of the vision of the project and how we see various activities working also between construction and mining services and how we envisage the project being constructed and managed. So that was useful for me and also useful for the team. So that work's underway, and there will be some additional packages of work from sort of some other infrastructure packages which they are well placed to be able to cost and quote for the feasibility study update. So remembering this is key inputs into the study update and making sure that we can also confirm to the banks that we've had our costs they're from reputable groups within Indonesia who know how to undertake these activities.
Just to clarify, Boomer is Doyd's operating subsidiary who actually carry out the contract mining work for them. Yeah,
correct. Yeah. So Boomer actually have two. They actually have two arms. Their main principal activity is mining services. Within mining services, they have sort of two sub areas. One is principally just undertaking the mining activities, and then the second one is around infrastructure development. So they have built up a significant team that has capabilities in delivering infrastructure for mines. So that's inclusive of road construction, civil earthworks, structural mechanical piping, mechanical equipment installations, etc. So they have grown their capabilities significantly over the course of the last, I think, 5 to 6 years in that space. So a majority of equipment packages have been issued for pricing, capital equipment packages, and a number have already been returned. clarifications ongoing, but we hope definitely all of those packages will be released before the end of this month, and we expect to have a significant number of those within the first couple of weeks of October completed. Other aspects are able to be worked through, and other disciplines are now starting to get really moving fast on their areas in new pros body of work around, particularly around the processing plant and the heap leach facility. We've had on one of the key aspects associated with the feasibility study, our transport and logistics. We've had our service provider, Transcontinent, has delivered us an option study, including unit costs for transport of operational materials, and looking at a range of different routes in which we could bring materials into the site. Was a critical element of that was required updating in the FS. There, sort of comments were made that we needed to make sure that we had a clear strategy defined, for this feasibility study, and up-to-date costing, because understanding that logistics is a significant, it's a challenge for BKM because it's a remote site. So understanding that we have accurately assessed the transport and logistics cost was really important. So having a look at what Transcontinent have provided us, we had to make some early assessments of what the transport and logistics costs were likely to be in some earlier work we had done, and the costs have come in very, very close to our initial assessment. So that's an encouraging sign, and means that sort of work we've done is consistent with what they've delivered to us. So that's been good. Transcontinent are an experienced logistics service provider for the resources industry. They're delivering operational logistics support to other mining companies in central Kalimantan. So we're confident that they have the knowledge to assess the reality of transport and logistics in this location, and what those costs are going to be. Just moving on, the next part, which is, I guess for me, is one of critical importance, and this is related to power. We had made some mention of this when we spoke back in August. Since then, we have KSK has signed a memorandum of understanding with PLN, that's the Indonesian national electricity provider, to commence work on options for delivering grid power to KSK. For the BKM copper project. We held the kickoff meeting earlier this month, a couple of weeks ago, not long after I left central Kalimantan. The feedback from PLN in the kickoff meeting is that there is sufficient grid power available for the BKM project. The grid conditions in central Kalimantan have improved significantly since the 2019 feasibility study, so that's a real positive for us. There's a detailed transmission line survey, which is being undertaken now. I think it's happening today over the course of the next 3 days. So yeah, really, they're investigating different. There's a couple of different ways that we could potentially run the power line from the main substation, which they have proposed as the best location, through to the site. So they're assessing those for access and what additional work might need to be done for that. Notwithstanding, we're looking at probably something like would be between 70 to 80 kilometre power line that we need to be run. There'll be technical options which are presented post that survey. Certainly, the initial indications from their technical team is that the requirements for BKM are such that we shouldn't need to go to sort of the high voltage systems, which would require the large towers to be installed. So we're hopeful that we're sort of just going to be under the limit that will allow sort of standard poles to be run for our transmission line, which generally speaking will make it a more straightforward approach to installing the power line, which is good. Once we have the technical requirements, of course, we need to sign off on those and make sure we're comfortable with those. We'll push to move on commercials with PLN. So yeah, we need to understand there's capital costs associated with this. There's the operating tariff. There'll be different ways in which we can approach hopefully the capital cost requirements for this, and that'll be a pretty key part of the negotiations. The operating tariff for electricity is going to be basically set as a standard for business to business with PLN.
So there's a result of a lot of work beginning to come in there, Darryn, some of which you've referred to as being quite positive. Will there be an opportunity to update the market more formally in a bit of detail on progress to date? I guess you've got a couple of studies coming in at the moment, but could you comment on that?
there's a couple of key things that I guess I'd like to try and have closed out before that, Sasha. I'd ideally like to make sure that we have, confirmation, at least technically, with PLN that we can provide grid power to the site. That's a really critical item, delivery of power for BKM. Being able to do that through delivery from the national grid within Central Kalimantan, will be a big positive. So I'd like to be able to update that with a more formal update with feedback on that item, as well as a couple of additional items that are starting to come through. So I hope a final sort of working through timing. Admittedly, some things have pushed on, and there's been some things which have changed a bit more than we probably expected when the first assessment of the FS update was completed. And very keen to get information out. We need to work through a couple of additional things before we can do that. So towards the end of October, I would hope to be able to put something more formal out. But if something changes in that, we'll have to make sure that we keep people informed.
Okay, thanks, Darryn.
Sure. Maybe just the final. Again, on our permitting, the key permit which we've discussed this quite a few times. The activities related to that are still well advanced. We're actually have kicked off some additional discussions with the forestry concession holder just this week to work through some technical items that are needed as part of the process of going through this permitting activity. So, I mean, for us, the key thing is that we appreciate that once this permit gets issued, it actually does trigger a number of obligations on the company. So it's important for us that we time our requirements for completing these activities and submitting our final documentation for this permit also lines up well with being able to say we're completing the feasibility study. We have our final investment decision, and then we're going forward to the banks and timing for those things. We want to make sure that we match up all of those activities together. So we're not putting obligations on the company before we have some of those other things in place. So I think that's quite important and something that we've been working through over the course of the last couple of months, just to make sure that we time those things correctly. On the permitting front, we're also completing an exploration permit, which I've spoken about before. The environmental requirements for that have been submitted and accepted, and now it's going through additional the next steps of that permit. So the exploration permit that we're going for will allow us to do the work on a limestone source, which is on the KSK contract of work. But it also allows us to do exploration activity outside of our current BKM boundary as well, should we decide. But our focus for that body of work will certainly be on assessing the limestone, drill testing the limestone resource that we know is at KSK, because as I've explained before, that if we can have our own limestone source on site, that would be a significant positive outcome for the overall feasibility or economics of the BKM copper project, as we would not have to import a part of our lime consumption, because it could be replaced with a local limestone source. So it's really important that we want to continue that progress and be able to start that work early next year. Moving on, I was able to do my first site visit in Central Kalimantan, which was fantastic. Place I had never been to Kalimantan in the 6 years, or just over 6 years, I've been living in Indonesia. So it was great to get to the island for the first time and be able to do both a site visit up to KSK and specifically BKM, and also get to meet the office team in Palangkaraya. So just looking at the site visit, once you get into the site, and I'm sort of working backwards here. I'm sort of working from being on site and then sort of working backwards on my way back to Palangkaraya. So I get access up into the BKM pit's actually not that difficult. A number of the access tracks are still in place, so able to get in and have a good walk across most of the deposit. So really helpful. There's a couple of good locations where you can clearly see copper at surface. So oxidized copper minerals here. You can see the green colours here in a couple of the photos below. they're clearly at surface, and then also found some samples of chalcocite as well, which is the high grade secondary copper mineralization. Some lumps of that sort of at surface. So yeah, it's really really good to be able to see. Gives you an understanding that, again, this is a relatively unique deposit that you have access to. You have access to those oxidized copper minerals very, very close to surface. So yeah, very exciting. Makes you want to get in there and start mining, actually. But there's a lot of work to do before we can do that. But no, it's really, really good to be able to get up, and for me, it's important to get a sense of the nature of the land and the nature of the ground conditions there, and it had been quite wet in I mean, it's a wet site, of course, but we'd had significant rainfall sort of before I had been on site, and certainly on one of the days I was there, and you get a sense of how much water flows in and around the different parts of the pit, which is good to appreciate when you're looking at how you're going to come to develop a site like this. So yeah, so it was really really informative to be able to have a good walk across the pit. And sorry, and the final slide's just a shot of our office team in Palancaraya, a small group, and again, many of the team here have been with KSK for a long time. I'm in the middle. Standing next to me is Mansour Geiger. He's our president director of KSK. He has been with the project for the best part of 40 years, from the very, very beginning all the way through to now. And many of the team haven't been with for that long, but many of the team have been, as I said before, 10, 20 years with the project. So everyone is interested and keen. Everyone wants to know sort of the update on the feasibility study, and everyone is really eager to get a project developed and to start their first mine. It's been explored for so long, and people want that development. So that's how we'd like to deliver value, is to be able to deliver this project and be able to start producing copper on site at BKM. Well, that's I guess the finish from my site visit, Sasha. Just going to move on to a couple of points about some corporate activity, if that's okay. So again, our engagement with DOID that remains very constructive and conducive. Definitely those discussions and work between ourselves, Asiamet, and DOID are still ongoing. They have given strong commitments, and this is from the CEO of DOID. Strong commitments that they will assign resources to help us on the BKM copper feasibility study update. They want to try and deliver the best outcome for the feasibility study, so they are keen to have their own resources, who have the skills, of course, to be able to help us deliver that. So there is definitely a commitment there to continue working with us on this, and corporately there's ongoing discussions and some review on how we can do that. Sorry, I should also mention, as is publicly noted in various forums, that DOID have are active in other activities, and they have their own requirements, both within here, business development and ongoing activities here within Indonesia, and of course also in Australia. The Indonesian team do a fair bit of work in supporting some of the activities with Boomer Australia. So recently another big contract win for Boomer Australia, an ongoing contract at Gunyal. Those sort of things also do take up time, and they do have other business development activities, of course. Not only what is happening with Asiamet. So again, it's there's resourcing there, but there is still a strong willingness for us to continue to work together on this project. Asiamet is actively engaging with groups who see value in the copper resources and reserves defined at KSK. There continues to be renewed interest in that. I mean, we had concluded the exclusivity period with DOID, and a number of groups understood that and have shown interest in KSK, and they see it as part of a strategy of diversification. It's evident within one thing that's become a clear theme that has become evident in the last couple of months, is that certainly coal mining businesses, companies within Indonesia are adopting strategies to utilise the benefits of the current high coal prices and using those benefits to diversify their business, whether diversification for different reasons, but definitely it's a strong theme that many coal groups are looking at things outside of coal, and that can be that is, I guess, in the past, and I sort of make this point at the end, nickel has been probably a big focus for that diversification, and of course, the nickel industry within Indonesia has taken off significantly over the course of the last sort of 3 to 4 years because of the such huge reserves of nickel that are available in Indonesia. But we're also starting to look at other things. Alumina, bauxite, alumina, and aluminium is one area, but also copper, of course. And people are. I don't think copper has got as much airplay as some, particularly as nickel, because copper is dominated by such the one or two very big producers in country. But the theme of the requirement of copper is definitely starting to permeate through to different groups, and now people are starting to understand the copper market and are starting to look for copper projects. So within Indonesia, Asiamet I feel has two of the best copper projects available. Tujuh Bukit, which held by Merdeka, is obviously a very, very large copper project, but of course that is held within Merdeka. But Asiamet has two very good copper assets in KSK and Butong. So I think that is starting to be noticed by people.
KSK project on the island of Kalimantan is in a is that predominantly a coal mining region?
Kalimantan is best known for coal mining. Yes, yeah. So in central Kalimantan there are large there's large coal deposits in central Kalimantan, south, and I guess predominantly in the east is the main coal. I guess probably the main coal mining region of Indonesia. There's another fairly significant coal mining region in sort of the southern end of Sumatra, but Kalimantan is probably the biggest area of coal. So businesses that are operating in Kalimantan who understand the conditions and understand what it means to work in this location are groups that have shown interest on, I guess, in a project that is located in Kalimantan, and they see that if they want to diversify into metals, an opportunity to maybe look at a project that is in their backyard is starting to make sense. And I think that's where we're starting to see some more corporate interest in the assets which are held by Asiamet and have been worked through and developed over the course of over the many years they've been held. But in terms of KSK particularly, and BKM, the feasibility studies done within the last few years, and what we're doing now is become of more interest to people. But I just think that some more attention is going to be diverted to other metals, and I think copper is going to be a prime example where companies are going to realise this, and leadership is going to realise that copper is such an important part. And if you want to develop something within Indonesia that has copper, I think Asiamet is a good place to start looking, if I could say that. So I think that's really quite important. I think we're in a good position here. A couple of other things. Interest in Butong has actually picked up certainly in the course of the last month, and several international groups have been engaging and keen to learn more about the asset. So certainly we're working on giving people access to our data room and letting people have a look and see what the Butong resource is about, and of course look at the KSK one as well. But certainly the size of Butong has piqued some interest in sort of some larger groups. Sort of interested in how people view that, and get some feedback hopefully in the next over the course of the next month or 2 months on that. I think that's about it, Sasha. Yeah. So our corporate activity is we still actively engaged and working with Deloitte on how we're taking KSK forward, but also realising that there are people and companies are understanding and starting to realise the potential value there. So we are and have to be open to those discussions. If we feel it's going to create value for our shareholders, and of course we're not locked into one particular path at this point in time, and between myself, Tony as a chairman and the board, we, as information becomes available and it can be considered, then and of course the board will do what is in the best interests of all shareholders. So it is an exciting time. I think the dawning of the realization of copper, particularly here in Indonesia, is it may have begun. I think it's probably coming on stronger over the course of the last couple of months.
Okay, very interesting, Darryn. Look, so you've covered the momentum and the feasibility study and the progress, which seems to be positive, that you're making in these directions on some major items: transport, earthworks, power, especially, and hopefully we'll get an update on that soon. Secondly, things seem to be there seems to be a lot of advancing a lot of interest from multiple parties on the project as well. Can I say that that's correct?
Yeah. There are. Yes, certainly. There's more activity in our data room, Sasha. People are interested. And people are. We're giving access for those groups to have a look and make their assessment and having those discussions. On a BD perspective as well.
So when can you come to make a trip? I understand you're very busy at the moment. When can you come over to London to tell people and to expand more on the value, the detail, the work that's going on, the interest, and how we're going to move forward to unlocking this value at KSK?
Yeah, good question, Sasha. We do obviously have quite a lot of things on at the moment, and trying to get a number of things, ensure they're moving the right way, particularly with the feasibility study, but some of the other corporate activity which we've discussed. I'd like to think that I would be able to have some time to come to London by the end of October. So I'd like to think that if things can progress as well as they are now, that I could have an opportunity sort of in 4 or 5 weeks' time to be able to come over. I think that's probably a realistic timeframe. Okay.
I'm sure investors would look forward to meeting you very much and going to a lot of the detail of what's going on behind the scenes there. So, okay. Well, I'm sure you've got lots to do, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Good one. All right. Thanks, Sasha. Good chance to talk.